Maya stepped through the glass doors of Lincoln High School, her heart beating fast in her chest. The hallways were filled with students laughing, talking, and rushing to their lockers. She clutched her schedule tightly in her sweaty palm and looked around for any familiar face. But there were none. This was her third school in 2 years, and starting over never got easier. Her father's job had moved their family to this small town called Riverside. Maya missed her old friends and her old life, but she knew she had to make the best of it. She was 17, with long black hair and kind brown eyes. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a worn backpack that had seen better days. The morning classes went by slowly. Maya sat quietly in the back of each classroom, trying not to draw attention to herself. Some students glanced at her curiously, but no one approached her. She was used to being the outsider, the new girl who didn't belong anywhere. When the lunch bell rang, Maya felt her stomach drop. Lunchtime was always the hardest part of being new. She followed the crowd to the cafeteria, a large room with round tables scattered throughout. The smell of pizza and French fries filled the air. Students sat in their usual groups, talking and laughing loudly. Maya grabbed a tray and got in line for food. She chose a simple sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. Her hands shook slightly as she paid the cashier. Now came the real challenge, finding somewhere to sit. She scanned the room, looking for an empty table or maybe a friendly face that might welcome her. Most tables were full of students who seemed to have known each other for years. Maya spotted a half-empty table near the window and started walking toward it. As she made her way across the cafeteria, balancing her tray carefully, she didn't notice the foot that suddenly appeared in her path. She tripped and stumbled forward, her tray flying from her hands. The sandwich, apple, and water bottle scattered across the floor with a loud crash. The entire cafeteria went silent for a moment, then erupted in laughter. Maya's face turned bright red as she bent down to clean up the mess. She could feel hundreds of eyes staring at her. This was exactly what she had been trying to avoid. "Look what we have here," said a loud, mocking voice above her. "The new girl can't even walk properly." Maya looked up to see a tall boy with blonde hair and cold blue eyes standing over her. He was wearing a Letterman jacket and had a cruel smile on his face. Several other students had gathered around, some laughing and others looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," Maya said quietly, continuing to pick up the pieces of her ruined lunch. "I didn't see your foot." "My foot?" the boy said, acting surprised. "You're saying I tripped you on purpose? That's a serious accusation, new girl." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She knew he had done it on purpose, but she also knew that making enemies on her first day would only make things worse. "No, I just wasn't paying attention. It was my fault." The boy's name was Derek Thompson, though Maya didn't know this yet. Derek was the kind of student who thought being popular gave him the right to make others miserable. He played on the football team and came from a wealthy family. He was used to getting his way and enjoyed showing off his power, especially to those he saw as weak. "That's right," Derek said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "You should watch where you're going. This isn't some small-town school where everyone holds your hand." Maya finished cleaning up and stood slowly, her tray now empty and her lunch ruined. Her stomach growled, but she was too embarrassed to go back through the lunch line. She just wanted to disappear. "Maybe next time you'll learn to fit in better," Derek continued, enjoying the attention he was getting from the crowd. "Or maybe you should just go back to whatever little town you came from." A few students laughed, but Maya noticed that some looked uncomfortable with Derek's behavior. A girl with red hair looked like she wanted to say something but stayed quiet. A boy with glasses shook his head but didn't speak up either. Maya tried to walk away, hoping the situation would end there. But Derek wasn't finished with his entertainment. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he said, grabbing Maya's arm roughly. "When someone gives you advice, you should say thank you." Maya pulled her arm free and looked Derek in the eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, hoping that would be enough to make him leave her alone. But Derek was enjoying this too much to stop. He had an audience, and making the new girl look foolish was boosting his ego. "You know what? I think you need to learn some manners. Maybe a lesson about respect." Maya's heart started beating faster. She could see the cruel intent in Derek's eyes. She looked around desperately, hoping a teacher would appear or that someone would help her. But the supervising teachers were at the far end of the cafeteria, and most students were either watching with interest or pretending not to see what was happening. "Please," Maya said softly, "I just want to eat my lunch." "Well, you already dropped your lunch," Derek said with a laugh. "So I guess you're out of luck." The tension in the cafeteria was growing. Some students started pulling out their phones, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. Maya realized that this moment would define how she was treated for the rest of her time at this school. If she backed down now, Derek and others like him would see her as an easy target. But she also knew that fighting back could make things much worse. She was new, alone, and had no allies. Derek had friends, popularity, and the home advantage. Maya felt trapped, standing in the middle of the cafeteria with dozens of students watching her every move. The next few moments would change everything, though Maya had no way of knowing it yet. Sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest consequences, and sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Maya took a deep breath and decided she couldn't let Derek continue humiliating her. She had been pushed around before at other schools, and running away had never solved anything. Maybe if she stood up for herself just once, Derek would leave her alone. "I said I was sorry," Maya said, her voice stronger now. "I cleaned up the mess and I thanked you for your advice." "What more do you want?" Derek's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He wasn't used to anyone, especially not a scared new girl, talking back to him. The crowd around them grew larger as word spread that something interesting was happening in the cafeteria. "What did you just say to me?" Derek asked, stepping closer to Maya. His voice was low and threatening. Maya's hands were shaking, but she stood her ground. "I said I already apologized." "I don't know what else you want me to do." The students watching began to murmur among themselves. Some were impressed that the new girl was standing up to Derek Thompson. Others were worried about what Derek might do next. Everyone knew Derek had a temper, and nobody wanted to be on his bad side. "You've got some nerve," Derek said, his face turning red with anger. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is?" Maya didn't know and didn't care. All she knew was that she was tired of being afraid. "I don't care who your father is. That doesn't give you the right to treat people badly." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Nobody talked to Derek Thompson like that. His father was one of the richest men in town, owning several businesses and having connections with important people. Derek was used to everyone either kissing up to him or staying out of his way. Derek's friends moved closer, forming a circle around Maya. She suddenly realized how outnumbered she was. There was Jake Martinez, Derek's best friend and fellow football player. There was also Brad Chen, who always did whatever Derek told him to do. And standing behind them were 3 other boys who liked to think they were tough. "I think you need to learn your place," Derek said coldly. "New girls don't get to mouth off to me." Maya looked around desperately. The teachers were still at the other end of the cafeteria, completely unaware of what was happening. The students who were watching seemed frozen, unsure whether to help or just enjoy the show. "Just leave me alone," Maya said, trying to step around Derek. "I don't want any trouble." But Derek moved to block her path. "Too late for that. You already caused trouble when you decided to disrespect me." Maya tried to push past him, but Derek grabbed her wrist tightly. His grip was strong and painful, and Maya winced as his fingers dug into her skin. "Let go of me," she said, trying to pull her arm free. "I'll let go when I'm ready," Derek replied with a cruel smile. That's when Maya made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of continuing to try to pull away, she used her free hand to push Derek hard in the chest. Derek stumbled backward, more from surprise than from the force of the push. The cafeteria erupted in shocked whispers. Students pulled out their phones and started recording. This was the kind of drama that would be talked about for weeks. Derek's face went from red to purple with rage. Nobody, especially not some random new girl, had ever put their hands on him. His reputation was everything to him, and Maya had just embarrassed him in front of half the school. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Derek snarled. Before Maya could react, Derek's hand shot out and struck her hard across the face. The slap echoed through the cafeteria like a gunshot. Maya stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek, which was already turning red and beginning to swell. The entire cafeteria went completely silent. Students stopped talking, stopped eating, and stopped moving. Even Derek's friends looked shocked. Pushing and shoving was one thing, but actually hitting a girl was something else entirely. Maya's eyes filled with tears, both from the pain and from the humiliation. Her cheek throbbed where Derek had hit her, and she could taste blood in her mouth where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. "Derek," gasped Sarah Williams, a girl who had been watching from a nearby table. "What did you do?" But Derek was too angry to care about what anyone thought. The fact that Maya had pushed him back had wounded his pride, and he wasn't thinking clearly anymore. "She started it," Derek said loudly, trying to justify his actions. "You all saw her push me first." Maya stood there in shock, holding her injured cheek. She couldn't believe what had just happened. In all her years of being the new girl, of being picked on and excluded, nobody had ever actually hit her before. Jake Martinez, Derek's best friend, looked uncomfortable. "Dude, maybe that was a little too far," he said quietly. Derek spun around to face Jake, his eyes blazing with anger. "Are you taking her side now?" "No, man, I'm just saying," Jake started, but Derek cut him off. "I'm just saying nothing," Derek snapped. She got what she deserved. Maya looked around the cafeteria at all the faces staring at her. Some students looked sympathetic, others looked excited by the drama, and a few looked disgusted with Derek's behavior. But nobody was doing anything to help her. Mrs. Patterson, one of the lunch supervisors, finally noticed that something was wrong. She started walking quickly across the cafeteria, but she was still too far away to have seen what happened. Maya realized that Derek would probably just lie about what happened. It would be his word against hers, and he was popular while she was nobody. Even with all the students who had witnessed it, she doubted many would be willing to speak up against Derek Thompson. Her cheek was swelling now, and she knew she needed to get ice on it. But more than that, she needed to get away from Derek and all the staring eyes. She felt humiliated, angry, and completely alone. As Mrs. Patterson got closer, Derek quickly stepped back and tried to look innocent. His friends scattered slightly, pretending they had just been standing around. Maya knew that in a few seconds she would have to explain what happened, and she had no idea how to make anyone believe her. What Maya didn't know was that her nightmare was far from over. In fact, the events of the next few minutes would make Derek Thompson regret his actions more than he ever thought possible. Mrs. Patterson reached the group just as Derek was trying to look innocent. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and kind eyes, but she had been supervising school lunches long enough to know when something serious had happened. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking between Maya and Derek. Then she noticed Maya's swollen cheek and the tears in her eyes. "Oh my goodness, Maya, what happened to your face?" Derek stepped forward quickly, putting on his most sincere expression. "Mrs. Patterson, it was an accident." Maya fell and hit her face on the table edge. "I was just trying to help her up." Maya stared at Derek in disbelief. The lie came so easily to him, and he said it with such confidence that even Maya almost doubted what had really happened. "Is that true, Maya?" Mrs. Patterson asked gently, though her experienced eyes suggested she suspected there was more to the story. Maya looked around at the crowd of students. Most of them were still watching, waiting to see what she would say. A few had their phones out, still recording. She saw Jake Martinez looking uncomfortable, and Sarah Williams seemed like she wanted to speak up. But Derek's cold stare warned her not to cause any more trouble. Maya started, then stopped. She could feel Derek's friends closing ranks around him. She could see the warning in Derek's eyes. She was new, outnumbered, and had no allies. Who would believe her over the popular football player? She tripped, Derek said again, more firmly this time. "Right, Maya? You were carrying your tray and you weren't watching where you were going." Maya's cheek throbbed with pain and she could taste blood in her mouth. Every instinct told her to tell the truth, to expose Derek for what he really was. But fear held her back. What if no one believed her? What if Derek and his friends made her life even more miserable? "Yes," Maya whispered, hating herself for the lie. "I tripped." Mrs. Patterson looked confused. Something didn't feel right about the situation. But without Maya confirming what really happened, there wasn't much she could do. "Well, let's get you to the nurse's office and put some ice on that cheek." As Mrs. Patterson led Maya away, Derek smirked with satisfaction. He had gotten away with it just like he always did. His father's money and influence had taught him that there were different rules for different people. And Maya had just learned that lesson the hard way. But what Derek didn't know was that someone else had been watching the entire incident. Someone who hadn't been intimidated by Derek's reputation or his friends. Someone who was now walking quickly toward the school's main office with a very different story to tell. Tony Castellano was a junior at Lincoln High, but he was unlike most of the other students. He was quiet, kept to himself, and had a reputation for being tough. Tony had short, dark hair, muscular arms covered in small scars and eyes that had seen more trouble than most adults. He lived with his uncle Rico in a small apartment above Rico's motorcycle repair shop. Tony had been sitting alone at a corner table when Derek hit Maya. He had seen the whole thing clearly, and Derek's casual lie made his blood boil. Tony knew what it was like to be powerless, to be on the receiving end of someone else's cruelty. He had spent years being pushed around before his uncle Rico had taught him to stand up for himself. While Mrs. Patterson was taking Maya to the nurse, Tony slipped out of the cafeteria and headed for the school office. He asked to use the phone, claiming it was a family emergency. The secretary, Mrs. Johnson, knew Tony's reputation and didn't ask questions. Tony dialed a number he knew by heart. After 2 rings, a gruff voice answered, "Rico's garage." "Uncle Rico, it's Tony," he said quietly, making sure no one could overhear. "What's wrong, kid? You sound upset." Tony quickly explained what he had witnessed in the cafeteria. He told his uncle about Maya, about Derek's attack, and about the lies that followed. As he spoke, Tony could hear his uncle's breathing getting heavier. Rico Castellano was not a man to cross. He was 45 years old, built like a brick wall and covered in tattoos that told the story of a hard life. He had served time in prison for assault when he was younger, but those days were behind him. Now he ran an honest business fixing motorcycles and took care of his nephew Tony. But Rico still had connections to his old life. He was a member of the Riverside Rebels, a motorcycle club that most people in town knew to avoid. The rebels weren't criminals, but they were tough men who believed in taking care of their own and standing up to bullies. "You sure about what you saw?" Rico asked. "I'm sure, Uncle Rico. This guy hit her hard and then he lied about it. She was too scared to tell the truth." Rico was quiet for a moment and Tony could hear him thinking. Finally, his uncle spoke again. "What's this kid's name?" "Derek Thompson. His father owns Thompson Industries." Rico knew the name. Rich family, thought they were better than everyone else. The kind of people who believed money could buy them out of any trouble. "And the girl? What do you know about her?" "She's new. I think her name is Maya. She seems nice, just trying to fit in. She didn't deserve what happened to her." Tony heard his uncle slam something down on his workbench. Rico had always had a soft spot for people who were being picked on. Maybe it was because he remembered what it was like to be young and angry and have nowhere to turn. "You did right calling me Tony. This Thompson kid thinks he can hit innocent girls and get away with it. He's about to learn different." Tony felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew his uncle could handle Derek, but he also knew that Rico sometimes went too far when he was angry. "Uncle Rico, I don't want you to get in trouble. Maybe we should just tell the principal or—" "The principal?" Rico laughed bitterly. "You think the principal is going to do anything to the son of one of this town's biggest donors? Money talks, kid. But you know what talks louder? Actions." Tony heard the sound of motorcycle engines starting up in the background. Rico was already calling his friends from the rebels. "Stay in school, Tony, do your homework. And don't worry about Derek Thompson. He's about to get a lesson in respect that he'll never forget." The line went dead and Tony hung up the phone. He thanked Mrs. Johnson and headed back toward the cafeteria, his heart pounding with anticipation. Derek Thompson had no idea what was coming his way. In his world of privilege and popularity, consequences were things that happened to other people. But in about 10 minutes, Derek was going to discover that some actions have consequences that money can't fix. And Maya, sitting in the nurse's office with ice on her swollen cheek, was about to learn that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. The rumble started as a distant sound, like thunder rolling across the sky. Students in the classrooms near the front of the school began looking out the windows, trying to figure out what was making the noise. The sound grew louder and closer until it became clear that it was the roar of motorcycle engines. Derek Thompson was in his 5th period history class, completely relaxed and confident. He had gotten away with hitting Maya, just like he always got away with everything. His friends had been giving him high fives all afternoon, impressed that he had put the new girl in her place. Derek felt powerful and untouchable. Mr. Harrison, the history teacher, was writing on the blackboard when the motorcycle sounds became impossible to ignore. The entire class turned toward the windows and several students gasped at what they saw. 8 large motorcycles were pulling into the school parking lot, their chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. The riders were all wearing black leather jackets with patches that read, "Riverside Rebels" across the back. "They looked like they meant business. What in the world?" Mr. Harrison muttered, stopping his lesson to look out the window. Derek felt a small flutter of nervousness in his stomach, but he pushed it away. This probably had nothing to do with him. Maybe it was some kind of school assembly or demonstration that he hadn't heard about. The bikers parked their motorcycles in a neat line near the front entrance of the school. They turned off their engines, and the sudden silence felt almost as dramatic as the noise had been. The lead rider was a massive man with a gray beard and arms like tree trunks. This was Rico Castellano, and his face showed the kind of determination that made smart people get out of his way. Rico pulled off his helmet and looked up at the school building. He had been thinking about this moment during the entire ride over, and his anger had only grown stronger. No spoiled rich kid was going to hit an innocent girl and walk away from it. Not in his town. The other riders gathered around Rico. There was Marcus "Tank" Williams, a former boxer who worked as a bouncer at the local bar. Next to him stood Jimmy Rodriguez, a mechanic who could fix anything with an engine and had fists that could break anything else. The group also included Danny "Scar" Morrison, Pete "Hammer" Johnson, and 3 other men who had all lived hard lives and didn't tolerate bullies. "You boys know the plan," Rico said quietly. "We're not here to hurt anyone who doesn't deserve it. We're here to teach one punk kid a lesson about respect." The bikers nodded. They had all heard Tony's story about what happened in the cafeteria, and every one of them was disgusted by Derek's behavior. Most of these men had daughters, sisters, or girlfriends, and the idea of some coward hitting a defenseless girl made their blood boil. Rico led the group toward the school's front entrance. Their heavy boots echoed on the pavement and their leather jackets creaked as they walked. Students who were outside for PE class stopped what they were doing and stared in amazement. Some pulled out their phones to record what was happening. Inside the school, word was spreading fast. Students were texting each other, passing notes, and whispering in the hallways. The bikers were here, and everyone wanted to know why. Principal Williams was in his office when his secretary burst through the door, looking panicked. "Sir, there are men with motorcycles asking to speak with you," she said breathlessly. Men with motorcycles? Principal Williams was a thin, nervous man who had been running Lincoln High for 10 years. He dealt with parents, teachers, and students every day, but motorcycle clubs were definitely outside his experience. "They say they need to discuss an incident involving one of our students. They seem very serious." Principal Williams straightened his tie and tried to look confident even though his hands were shaking slightly. He walked to the front office where he found Rico and 2 of his men waiting. The other bikers were standing outside, making sure Derek couldn't leave the building. "Gentlemen," Principal Williams said, trying to sound calm. "I'm Principal Williams. How can I help you?" Rico stepped forward, and Principal Williams had to resist the urge to step backward. Rico was intimidating even when he was trying to be polite. "We're here about Derek Thompson," Rico said in a voice that was quiet but somehow more threatening than if he had been shouting. "He hit a girl in your cafeteria today, and then he lied about it." Principal Williams felt his stomach drop. He had heard about some kind of incident involving the new student Maya, but Mrs. Patterson had told him it was just an accident. "I think there might be some misunderstanding," Principal Williams said carefully. "The young lady in question said she fell and hit her face on a table." Rico's eyes narrowed. The young lady was scared and outnumbered. "My nephew Tony saw the whole thing. Derek Thompson hit that girl in the face hard and then threatened her into keeping quiet about it." The principal's mind was racing. Tony Castellano was a good student who had never caused trouble. If Tony said he saw Derek hit Maya, then it was probably true. But Derek's father was one of the school's biggest donors, and his family had a lot of influence in the town. "Even if that's true," Principal Williams said nervously, "this is a school matter. We have procedures for dealing with student discipline issues." Rico smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Your procedures obviously don't work. Derek Thompson has been bullying students for years, and nothing ever happens to him because his daddy has money. Well, money can't protect him from everything." Meanwhile, back in the history classroom, Derek was starting to realize that the bikers might actually be there because of him. Other students were looking at him strangely, and he could hear whispers about the cafeteria incident. "Derek Thompson, please report to the principal's office immediately," came the announcement over the school's intercom system. Derek's face went pale. The classroom fell completely silent and everyone turned to stare at him. His confident swagger disappeared as he realized that somehow, someone had found out what really happened in the cafeteria. "Mr. Thompson," said Mr. Harrison, You heard the announcement? Derek gathered his books with shaking hands. As he walked toward the door, he could hear students whispering behind him. The hallway seemed longer than usual as he made his way toward the principal's office, each step bringing him closer to whatever consequences were waiting for him. He had no idea that Rico and the Riverside Rebels were planning to teach him a lesson he would never forget. Derek Thompson's world of privilege and immunity was about to come crashing down around him, and there was nowhere he could run to escape what was coming. Derek's legs felt like rubber as he walked down the hallway toward the principal's office. Other students pressed themselves against their lockers to get out of his way, sensing that something big was about to happen. The whispers followed him like shadows, and Derek could feel his carefully built reputation crumbling with each step. When Derek reached the main office, he could see through the glass doors that several large men in leather jackets were inside. His mouth went dry as he recognized them as the bikers who had pulled up to the school. Principal Williams noticed Derek approaching and motioned for him to come in. Derek pushed open the door and immediately felt the weight of 8 pairs of eyes staring at him. Rico stepped forward and Derek had to tilt his head back to look up at the man's face. Rico was even more intimidating up close, with scars on his knuckles and eyes that seemed to see right through Derek's fake confidence. "So you're Derek Thompson," Rico said, his voice low and dangerous, "the tough guy who likes to hit girls." "I don't know what you're talking about," Derek said, but his voice cracked slightly. "There's been some kind of mistake." Rico smiled coldly. "The only mistake was thinking you could get away with it." He turned to Principal Williams. "We'd like to have a private conversation with Derek. Maybe outside where we won't disturb your other students." Principal Williams looked terrified. He knew he should protect Derek, but he also knew these men weren't going to take no for an answer. "I can't allow students to leave school grounds with unauthorized individuals." "Then we'll talk right here," Rico said, turning back to Derek. "In front of everyone." Derek looked around desperately. Through the office windows, he could see that students and teachers were gathering in the hallway, trying to get a look at what was happening. Word had spread throughout the entire school that the Riverside Rebels were here because of Derek. "Look," Derek said, trying to sound confident but failing miserably, "I don't know who told you whatever story you heard, but it's not true. Maya fell and hurt herself. That's all that happened." Marcus Tank Williams stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "You calling my friend's nephew a liar?" Derek's eyes widened as he realized that one of these bikers was related to Tony Castellano. Tony had seen everything, and now Derek understood how the bikers had learned the truth. "Tony must have misunderstood what he saw," Derek said weakly. Rico laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Tony has good eyes and a good memory. He saw you slap that girl across the face. He saw you lie about it afterward. And he saw that girl too scared to tell the truth because you and your friends intimidated her." Derek's last hope was his father's influence. "My father is William Thompson of Thompson Industries. He donates a lot of money to this school and this community. You can't just come in here and threaten me." "Your father's money doesn't mean anything to us," said Jimmy Rodriguez, speaking for the first time. "We don't work for him, we don't owe him anything, and we're not impressed by his bank account." Rico nodded. "Money can buy you a lot of things, Derek. It can buy you nice clothes, expensive cars, and even protection from school punishment. But it can't buy you respect, and it can't protect you from the consequences of being a coward." Derek was starting to panic. These men weren't responding to any of his usual tricks. They didn't care about his father's money or his popularity at school. They were here for justice, and Derek was beginning to understand that he was in serious trouble. "What do you want from me?" Derek asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "First," Rico said, counting on his fingers, "you're going to go to that girl and apologize. Not some fake apology, but a real one. You're going to admit what you did and tell her you were wrong." Derek wanted to refuse, but the look in Rico's eyes made it clear that this wasn't a suggestion. "Second," Rico continued, "you're going to tell Principal Williams the truth about what happened. No more lies, no more blaming the victim. And third," added Tank, stepping closer to Derek, "you're going to change your behavior. No more bullying, no more picking on people who can't fight back. No more thinking you're better than everyone else because your daddy has money." Derek looked around the room desperately, hoping someone would come to his rescue, but Principal Williams was too scared to intervene, and Derek's friends were nowhere to be seen. He was completely alone, facing the consequences of his actions for the first time in his life. And if I refuse? Derek asked, though he already knew he didn't really have a choice. Rico smiled again, and this time it was genuinely frightening. Then we'll be having this conversation again, and next time, it won't be at your school where there are teachers and administrators around. It'll be somewhere more private where we can discuss things more freely. The threat was clear, and Derek felt his knees go weak. These weren't empty words from angry parents or frustrated teachers. These were serious men who meant every word they said. Okay, Derek whispered. I'll do what you want. Smart choice, Rico said. But understand this, Derek, we'll be watching you. Tony goes to this school and he'll let us know if you go back to your old ways. If we hear that you're bullying anyone else, if we hear that you're making that girl's life difficult, we'll be back. And next time we won't be nearly this polite. Derek nodded frantically, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Rico turned to Principal Williams. We'll be going now, but I expect to hear that this situation has been handled properly. That girl deserves an apology, and Derek here deserves some real consequences for his actions. Principal Williams nodded weakly. Of course. I'll make sure everything is handled appropriately. The bikers filed out of the office, their heavy boots echoing in the hallway. Students scrambled to get out of their way as they walked toward the exit. Rico paused at the door and looked back at Derek one last time. Remember what we talked about, he said quietly. We'll be watching. As the bikers left the building and rode away on their motorcycles, Derek collapsed into a chair. His whole body was shaking and he felt like he might throw up. For the first time in his life, Derek Thompson had encountered people who weren't impressed by his family's money or his social status. He had met real consequences for his actions, and it was the most terrifying experience of his life. Maya was sitting in the nurse's office holding an ice pack against her swollen cheek when she heard the rumble of motorcycle engines outside. She looked out the small window and saw 8 bikers riding away from the school. She had no idea that their visit had anything to do with her. 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock on the nurse's office door. Mrs. Patterson, the lunch supervisor, peeked her head in. Maya, dear, could you come with me to Principal Williams' office? There's something that needs to be discussed. Maya's heart sank. She assumed she was in trouble for the incident in the cafeteria, even though she had been the victim. This was exactly what she had been afraid of when she decided not to tell the truth about what Derek had done. Am I in trouble? Maya asked quietly. Mrs. Patterson's expression was kind but serious. No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble at all. Just come with me. Maya followed Mrs. Patterson down the hallway, her cheeks still throbbing with pain. Students stared at her as she passed, and she could hear whispers about the bikers who had visited the school. Maya kept her head down, wishing she could disappear. When they reached the principal's office, Maya was surprised to see Derek Thompson sitting in one of the chairs. He looked terrible. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and he couldn't seem to look anyone in the eye. Principal Williams was behind his desk, looking almost as nervous as Derek. Maya, please sit down, Principal Williams said gently. Derek has something he wants to say to you. Maya sat down hesitantly, confused about what was happening. She glanced at Derek, who was staring at the floor like it was the most interesting thing he had ever seen. Derek, Principal Williams prompted. Derek took a deep, shaky breath and finally looked up at Maya. When he saw her swollen cheek and the bruise that was forming around her eye, he winced. For the first time, he was really seeing the damage he had caused. Maya, Derek began, his voice cracking. I owe you an apology, a real apology. Maya blinked in surprise. This was not what she had been expecting. Derek swallowed hard and continued. What happened in the cafeteria today? It wasn't an accident. I hit you. I slapped you across the face and then I lied about it. I made you too scared to tell the truth, and that was wrong. Maya stared at Derek in shock. She had never expected him to admit what he had done, especially not in front of Principal Williams. I was angry and embarrassed because you stood up to me, Derek continued, the words coming faster now. I'm used to everyone just doing what I want, and when you didn't back down, I lost my temper. But that's no excuse for what I did. Hitting you was cowardly and wrong, and lying about it afterward was even worse. Principal Williams leaned forward in his chair. Derek, is this the truth? Are you telling me that you deliberately struck Maya and then covered it up? Derek nodded miserably. Yes, sir. That's exactly what happened. Maya never did anything wrong. She was just trying to defend herself, and I hurt her because I could. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes, but this time they weren't tears of pain or humiliation. They were tears of relief. Finally, someone was telling the truth about what had happened. Finally, she wasn't alone with her secret. Maya, Derek said, turning to face her directly. I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry for hitting you and for making you feel like you couldn't tell anyone what really happened. You didn't deserve any of that, and I was completely wrong. Maya looked into Derek's eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine remorse. This wasn't the cocky, cruel boy who had humiliated her in the cafeteria. This was someone who had been forced to confront his own behavior and didn't like what he saw. Why are you telling the truth now? Maya asked quietly. Derek glanced at Principal Williams, then back at Maya. Because some people made me realize that actions have consequences, and because you deserve better than what I did to you. Principal Williams cleared his throat. Derek, you understand that there will be serious consequences for your actions? Assault on another student is not something this school takes lightly. Derek nodded. I understand, sir. I'll accept whatever punishment you think is fair. Principal Williams looked at Maya. Maya, I owe you an apology as well. We should have investigated this incident more thoroughly from the beginning. You should have felt safe to tell us the truth. Maya wiped her eyes and managed a small smile. Thank you, sir. Over the next few days, the story of what happened spread throughout the school. Derek received a 2-week suspension and was removed from the football team for the rest of the season. More importantly, his reputation as the untouchable popular kid was destroyed. Students who had been afraid of him before now saw him as a bully who had been put in his place. Maya, on the other hand, found that her courage in standing up to Derek had earned her respect from many of her classmates. Sarah Williams, the red-haired girl who had witnessed the cafeteria incident, approached Maya the day after Derek's confession. I'm sorry I didn't speak up for you that day, Sarah said. I was too scared of Derek and his friends, but I should have done the right thing. It's okay, Maya replied. I understand why you were scared. Sarah smiled. Would you like to sit with me and my friends at lunch today? For the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, Maya felt like she might actually belong somewhere. Tony Castellano also approached Maya later that week. He was still quiet and kept to himself, but he made sure Maya knew that if anyone ever bothered her again, she should let him know. Why did you help me? Maya asked him. You don't even know me, Tony shrugged. My uncle taught me that when you see someone getting hurt, you don't just walk away. You do something about it. Maya smiled. Your uncle sounds like a good man. He is, Tony said. And so are his friends. They don't like bullies. As for Derek, the experience changed him in ways he hadn't expected. Being forced to face the consequences of his actions had been terrifying, but it had also been educational. He began to understand how his behavior had affected other people, and he didn't like the person he had been. Derek's parents were furious when they learned what had happened, but not in the way he had expected. Instead of protecting him from consequences, his father sat him down for a long conversation about responsibility and respect. Money and influence can protect you from a lot of things, his father told him, but they can't protect you from being a bad person. If you want to be someone worth respecting, you have to earn it through your actions, not your bank account. Derek started making an effort to change his behavior. He stopped hanging around with the friends who had encouraged his bullying, and he began treating other students with respect. It wasn't easy, and many people were suspicious of his motives at first. But gradually, Derek began to rebuild his reputation based on better choices. Maya's cheek healed completely within a few weeks, but the confidence she had gained from standing up for herself lasted much longer. She made friends, joined the school newspaper, and discovered that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. The story of Derek and Maya became legendary at Lincoln High School. It was a reminder that actions have consequences, that bullies can be stopped, and that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. And somewhere across town, Rico Castellano went back to fixing motorcycles, satisfied that justice had been served and that one young bully had learned an important lesson about respect.